Okay, we've got lots of people joining us at the moment, so I'd like to welcome everyone who's joined us this evening for really a celebration of good practice in character education by Paul Watts, Michael Fullard and Andrew Peterson. We've also got 4 excellent speakers here to celebrate the launch of this book this evening as well. They're going to be speaking about the content of this book and in its applications, basically. But I'd like to say a few words really about 2 of our authors, Paul Watts and Michael Fullard. Not only is this their first book, these 2 young men are also teachers. They're actually outstanding teachers. We know that not just from Ofsted, but from their head teachers when they were in school. They're absolutely fantastic teachers. And it's really good that they've put this book together, as I said, a celebration of good practice. So we want to celebrate, in particular, Paul and Michael's first foray into the publishing world. And what a book it is. It's published by the Open University Press, and that's not an easy publisher to get published by. So I'm very impressed by that. So I want to congratulate Andrew, of course, as well, but particularly Paul and Michael on this occasion. So congratulations. And I'm going to hand over to your chair this evening, who's Tom Harrison. Tom.
Thank you very much indeed, James. And yeah, echoing a massive thank you to everyone who's joined us today on what is a beautifully sunny day here in the UK, but I know we've got people joining us around the world as well. It's great to have so many of you joining us for this really kind of exciting celebratory event, as James has said, to celebrate the launch of Understanding Character Education. In my role as Director of Education for the Jubilee Centre for Character and Virtue, since I took the role over 10 years ago, what I've been really passionate about is ensuring that there is great research and theory that underpins character education. But what really matters to me, and I know to so many of you as well, that this research and theory is used to really inform and change practice on the ground. And that's why I'm so delighted to be hosting this session this evening, because this book here really does that. It shows in an intelligent way how the theory and practice of character education can actually be applied in schools and colleges in the UK, but also across the world as well. So it answers big questions in an intelligent and persuasive way. One of the many strengths of the book is the number of case studies, and it's great to see so many of the case study authors with us today. So a special thank you to them. And wherever you are, I hope you can just raise a kind of a virtual or actual glass wherever you are, just to say congratulations and cheers for the launch of Understanding Character Education book today. So congratulations, and consider the book duly launched at this point. But in the spirit of the humility, which may be slightly less after James's opening words about Michael and Paul originally, Andrew, Paul and Michael have asked this session to actually be handed over to practitioners to talk firsthand about their work and how they implement character education in their settings. So we do have 4 fantastic, as I say, speakers with us today who are going to speak for 7 minutes each from a different topic and a different perspective on character education. Please do offer comments and questions in the Q&A box that you can see at the bottom of your screens there, and I will do my best to pick up as many of those questions and direct them to our speakers after we've heard from all 4 of them. So please do use that feature. But without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker today, who is Nat Parnell, who's the Regional Director of United Learning. I met Nat first time during one of the character kite mark inspections at his school. At that time, they were the 2nd school in the country to receive the character kite mark. But Nat comes from a maths teaching background, and he took up his first headship at Northampton Academy, and now Nat is the Regional Director for the Academy chain United Learning, working with academies across Lancashire and Yorkshire. But most importantly for us today, he is the Trust Lead for Behaviour, Ethos and Character. So over to you, Nat.
Thanks very much, Tom. Yes, and congratulations, Paul, Michael, and Andrew. It's a really great book, something that's going to be of real use, practical use on the ground, as well as obviously giving you some academic background. I really enjoyed it. It's a great honour to be invited to speak today. As a lad who grew up on Ferrier estate in southeast London, two parents who didn't have two pennies to rub together, I hope I've kept a bit of a sense of humility, and it still really surprises me when people actually seem to want to hear me speak. But so thinking back to my parents, I think they did a lot to instill character deliberately without me quite really realizing, despite a kind of very modest background. I remember a hell of a lot of rules that were not allowed to be broken. We had timers for eating and timers for piano practice, clarinet lessons, violin lessons, and band practice, and later on sort of squash club, and also quite heavy monitoring of work and what I was up to at school and so on. So I was very fortunate that happened, and I think that instilled things that I've only really realized sort of in the last 10, 15 years were actually kind of virtues and benefits of that immediate start. I think learning how to stick at things even when they're not immediately fun, enjoying success after hard work, teamwork, commitment, repetitive practice, a decent respect for authority, and a value of civic service. I think just some of those attributes that come from for all youngsters really are heavily influenced by what happens at home. So yeah, I only really had a vague concept of character and character education until I arrived at headship. And if you've been ahead, if you don't quite realise what a difficult and what a kick in the stomach every day is when you take on a school in any circumstances, let alone a difficult one. And that was certainly the case at Northampton. And we realised quite quickly we've got praise and sanctions right, but they only take you so far, and they aren't good for sustained change. And a new vice principal, Chris Klein, joined the school. He was already working with Tom and Jubilee Centre, and he brought some real structure to what we were doing there. And then, so referencing the book itself and how that relates to what the work that we did, in chapter 2, which is my favourite chapter, by the way, it talks about the character of the teacher and the importance of role modelling. A couple of quotes: whether teachers acknowledge their role as an exemplar or not, young people in their care will learn from their manner, behaviour, attitudes and dispositions. And also, it's important, therefore, not to underestimate the impact of even the briefest of interactions with pupils. And we bore that in mind very much. So right from the top, right from the senior team, the head, we created a manifesto about how we were going to behave, what our values were. We got those cemented, talked through the semantics, tested those values at every single interview that took place to the school. Because I mean, we took the view, and I took the view that by the time you're an adult, you've got a pretty firm set of values, and if those are in line with the organisation you're in, broadly speaking, you're going to feel at home and happy in that place. If your values are very much at odds and perpendicular to the organisation, you might not realise why, but you're just going to be unhappy and uncomfortable. So yeah, and we deliberately and consciously made sure that we promoted that throughout the school, and that resulted in the Kite Mark being awarded. One of those values is humility, which has been mentioned tonight, and I think it's important to note that as a head, you are the most important person to be practically demonstrating humility. I took that rather literally though, and I used to walk around with a bin bag. I spent 4 years of headship walking around with a bin bag and a litter picker. Interestingly though, it does make you kind of invisible. If you turn up with a clipboard, everyone's on edge. If you waffle around with a bin bag and a litter picker, you kind of blend into the environment and people to ignore you, which is quite useful if you're monitoring what's going on. Right, so back to chapter 1, and another quote. One of Character.org's 11 principles is that the school assesses its implementation of character education, its culture and climate, and the character growth of students on a regular basis. So what the Jubilee Centre materials helped us to do was to really kind of systematically define which of the areas of character that we were at and where we were going to work towards, and give us a kind of a map of the school and an idea whether we're making progress or not. As a mathematician, that really appealed to me. So that was good. And then chapter 3 talks about establishing appropriate learning environments. A quote: schools are to a large extent made and sustained by their distinctive ethos, a word which comes from the ancient Greek meaning character and culture. In broad terms, the ethos and culture of a school can be understood as referring to the actual values, relationships and conduct that operate consistently in the everyday life. So in taking up, my regional director post across 7 or 8 schools, and then taking on the lead for character education and behaviour across all the 46 secondary academies in our group, we needed a really good and simple way of finding out where the schools were and for the schools to evaluate themselves and move on. So we've created a one-page on a page based on the Jubilee Centre, kind of an audit framework, which is remarkably easy to apply. And we're increasingly monitoring, both at school level and central level, those key metrics to do with character and ethos: attendance, persistent absence, fixed term exclusions, staff survey results, pupil survey results, and then some kind of more left of field metrics. So when Chris described integrity at Northampton Academy, he spoke about, if you found a fiver in the courtyard, would you return it? And of course, there's a little chuckle, but in the end, the message gets through. And we'd never had much, if any, money returned before. The year after we started using that example, we had over £200 returned to the front office desk. That's a metric worth calculating and a really good and important indicator. So just to finish, chapter 5 talks about teaching character education within and across the curriculum, and how important it is that you intentionally, explicitly design that into your curriculum. So at United Learning, we're currently meeting and designing a character education, not as a subject of its own, but something that's really deliberately developed through other subjects and experiences in the school, something that we can apply in a consistent but not restrictive way across all of our secondary academies, something that students benefit from and staff welcome. And that is the next stage for us. So look, that's me, that's my time up. I just congratulate you chaps on this book. It's a cracking read, a really useful resource, and thanks again for this opportunity to talk about it.
Thank you very much indeed, Nat, and for giving us that perspective of how important leaders are for implementing character education, and obviously ensuring that it's not just what you say, but actually also what you do into that exemplary fashion. Now I realise why our authors invited you guests on, so that you can complement the book from that distance as well. So I could see what's happening here now. But that was really enlightening, Nat, and really thanks for your personal reflection. We're now going to move on to our second guest speaker today, who is Julie Taylor, who is a Senior Teaching Fellow at the University of Warwick. Julie Taylor is a very close friend of the Centre, has done a lot of great work alongside us for many years, and is one of the graduates of the MA Character Education programme, which I had the pleasure of kind of leading when Julie was a student there. So it's a real pleasure to welcome Julie back to speak at this session. Julie Taylor, as I say, is a Senior Teaching Fellow at the University of Warwick. She leads on all the primary and early years school direct programme, and is the primary early years mentoring and partnership lead. So she's got a lot of work on her plate, but she's also, as I say, been an alumni of our MA Character Education, and going to tell us about how she's applied some of that theory into her daily practice. So over to you, Julie.
Thank you so much, Tom, and thank you so much for inviting me, and congratulations. I won't blow too much smoke, but I will say congratulations to everybody. The book is brilliant. It's really, really useful. And I have spent quite a considerable amount having a read through and finding out lots of information from it, which, even as somebody who's looked into character education quite a lot, I've still learned lots of things that I'm going to use in my practice as well. And I'm recommending it to all my students, so it's a great read. It really has been an exciting and rewarding journey in character. Tom's mentioned already that I was part of the MA in character education, and it's been really super rewarding for me to be able to see the impact of the character and virtue-based initiatives that I've led on within our department. I'm going to build on what Nat said, actually, and just emphasise that a commitment to character is going to be a journey. It's not something that's a quick fix. It's really evident that in the book as well. It's going to be something that you're going to have to really personalise for your setting that you're based in. And an ethos, a character-focused ethos, really does take time to embed, and needs to be something that requires careful and intentional thought. So Certainly our journey is still ongoing, but what we've seen over the last few years as we keep implementing things related to character and virtues has been really positive, and I'm absolutely thrilled to see the impact it has had on our student teachers. So the case study I wrote for the book features in the section on the character of the teacher. We do give some explicit input on character to enable our student teachers to be able to teach character in school as well, and I'm always supported by the Jubilee Centre on doing an introductory session on character education, which is actually happening tomorrow, which is exciting. But I'm going to be talking mainly about the work that we've done about character and virtue development for teachers, and sharing with you some examples of the intentionally planned and purposeful opportunities we've implemented over the last few years. One of the first things we did was to rethink the way that we taught professionalism. When I first started at Warwick, it was very much a lecture about what you should do and what you shouldn't do, and it didn't go down particularly well with the students. So we changed the approach to more of a seminar-based exploration, and we built in some ethical dilemmas which are really aimed at enhancing our trainees' understanding of what it means to be a professional, rather than just looking at the sort of what you should wear, what you should do, etc. And our trainees are given the opportunities to unpick and analyse real-life examples of challenging situations from their placements, so they are authentic ones, and they're able to sort of unpick them and look at them in a really safe space at university, supported by their personal tutor, and enable them to talk to others about what might be and what, or perhaps what was, the most appropriate moral course of action and why. We feel that this has had a contribution in developing phronesis, the idea of practical wisdom from Aristotle's work, and it's really equipped our early career teachers to deal more effectively with morally complex situations, and we've had that feedback from them. They just feel more prepared to be able to deal with some of the challenges, particularly those where virtues may be in conflict, where they feel that kind of conflict between their virtues perhaps and what they've seen happening. I saw in the book, and this came up a lot in the research I did as part of my MA, that the teacher standards and the new ITT core content framework seem to be more weighted towards the technical aspects of teaching. They don't give very much guidance on the moral responsibilities expected of teachers. So we've recognised our role as teacher educators to develop understanding in this area, because we really believe that our next generation of teachers should see themselves as virtuous practitioners as well as just competent teachers. We've got 3 core values at Warwick in our department, which are social justice, intellectual curiosity and creativity, but I wanted to make these much more prominent, and I also wanted to emphasise a wider range of virtues that would impact on the trainees. So I developed a values framework, aligning the Warwick values with the virtue building blocks from the Jubilee Centre's framework, and that framework now underpins all aspects of our programme. Reflection on character is a key theme throughout the book, and reflection on virtues is certainly a key part of our programme. It starts as early as the recruitment stage, where we ask our prospective teachers to start thinking about their character and the type of teacher they want to be. And once they're on the course, the trainees use the values framework I've just referred to reflect regularly on their evolving professional identity. They have designated time to consider in depth the virtues they wish to embody as a teacher, and they have planned and guided reflection sessions to build on that further. We know that the majority of our students come into the profession for moral reasons. They want to make a difference to children, and we feel the reflection process has shown to have a real impact on their motivation and their sense of purpose, particularly when they're having really challenging times or they're feeling a little bit disillusioned by the system, which we often all do, I think, at some point. With research showing that performance virtues can become very heavily weighted in school due to the accountability nature of the education system, we really want to make sure that our trainees don't lose sight of the moral reasons why they wanted to become a teacher in the first place. Embedding character comes with its challenges, and probably our biggest challenge is to build on the good work that we're doing at university in the wider partnership. So whatever we do at university has to be supported and built on by our partners in school, or otherwise it's not going to have the impact that we want it to have. So we've made sure that we have similar opportunities for reflection and explicit references to character and virtues through our school practice as well. So we have an expectation that our trainees reflect on their own personal virtues with their mentor each week through regular professional dialogue, and they get feedback on their character as well as their classroom practice, which we think both are important to make a good teacher. It's clear in the book that teaching is an unavoidably moral and ethical endeavour. And teachers are always going to be viewed as moral role models by their pupils, so we do expect our students to make a commitment to their personal as well as their professional growth. We're also working at the moment on trying to move away from a traditional hierarchical mentoring approach to a more ethical coaching model. And although this is work in progress, we have seen that when mentors view themselves as moral role models and consciously embody the virtues, this can certainly have a positive impact on our trainees, and I certainly hope to do some future research on this in the future. So that's a very brief summary. Sorry for rabbiting through that really quickly, but I hope that was useful. And the book is such a great resource, and as I mentioned at the beginning, I'll certainly be recommending it to our students and our wider partnership to really embed and develop their knowledge of character. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. Packed so much into your 7 minutes there. Excellent. And really passionately showed us, you know, how actually the kind of the character of teachers themselves is so important in the whole character education picture. But showing us as how you don't just kind of talk the talk, but actually walk the walk, and giving us lots of examples of what you actually do in your practice there with students, making it so explicit at the University of Warwick, and who many other universities. Our university does do it. Many other universities hopefully will follow your lead on that.
Let's hope.
So, thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
Just a reminder, we're just starting to get questions in the Q&A, and please do put your questions down into the Q&A if you want any of our speakers to answer them. We're going to listen to the next two speakers, and then we will have time to pick up those questions at the end. So please do use that Q&A function for that. Over to our next speaker, who is Adrian McLean, who's the Trust Lead for Severn Academy's Education Trust. Again, Adrian is a kind of a close friend and colleague of the Jubilee Centre, and we should be raising a glass to him as well, because he has just handed in his dissertation for the MA Character Education, and will be graduating no doubt this year. Fingers crossed that is right, Adrian, because they are still being marked, but fingers crossed we'll be graduating this year. But Adrian has a great deal of experience. He's a former head teacher and currently, as I say, the Severn Academy's Education Trust Director of Inclusion. But much of this work, as I know because I've had long conversations with Adrian about this, focused on the development of a character education framework across all of the Trust schools. This includes the development of student, staff and parent pledges to ensure all stakeholders work collaboratively to develop the whole child. So character education is really a passion of Adrian, and he practices it in what he does day in, day out at the Academy. So over to you, Adrian.
Thanks, Tom. And like everybody before me, firstly, I'd like to start by congratulating Paul, Michael and Andrew on creating the content of this publication. It's much needed and extremely timely as educators return to school, having faced 18 months of uncertainty. However, this uncertainty has engaged many of us in dialogue about what needs to change, and more importantly, given a recognition of why developing character in our young people is so important. As Nat said in his testimony for the book, if everybody in education read and applied chapter 2, it would be transformational for all involved. The 7 chapters of this book enable exactly what the title states, understanding the different approaches, applications and challenges when implementing character education. They enable you to seek out the work of others so that you can understand the journey, the successes, and most importantly, the pitfalls, so that you can adapt and apply them in your own context. Today, I'm going to focus on the chapter which is around behaviour for learning and the use of character-based approaches. This has significantly enriched and been a game changer in the schools I've worked in and with to support. This is a philosophy I've always held and used, even before I was introduced to the term character education 5 years ago. As adults who work with young people, I want you to mull over the following situation I'm about to describe. When a young person in a learning capacity is unable to understand the concept, in my experience, classroom-based staff will often go an extra mile to exhaust a multitude of different ways to help that student break through this barrier. It's truly inspirational to see. However, we often don't see the same energy for behaviour and behaviour management. It can go from 0 to 100 really quick. We hear a lot in the media about zero tolerance, tougher discipline in schools being required. My experience tells me that we don't, and that the term zero tolerance is one that's misapplied. We do not want our young people chastised, constantly sanctioned in ways that are meaningless to them, or excluded from school communities. The last time I checked, it's part of a child's job description to push boundaries, get things wrong and test us adults. We expect our young people to know and apply right from wrong when actually they've not yet acquired the experiences or practical wisdom to do so. Note I say yet. This is where our relationships come in as parents, educators and significant adults in their lives. We have to take time to build relationships that enable our young people to be taught how to apply virtues when situations arise and understand how to navigate difficult choices when conflict arises. We must empower them to own their behaviour and learn the lessons through constant dialogue so that they understand where things went wrong, what they can do differently next time, and most importantly, how they can put the situation right. We have to give them the opportunity to have their voice heard and be part of the process so that they can acquire the practical wisdom that I'm talking about to apply in future situations. Sometimes as adults, we're quick to forget that where we are now is not where we've always been in terms of our development, and our young people don't have that development yet. Yes, it's a difficult balance amongst the various pressures that staff face in schools, with a lack of time often cited as a factor. A character-based approach, as you've already heard, is not an overnight fix, but one that yields a much greater reward. I'm not going to delve any deeper into this, as you need to buy the book to find out some more. What I will share with you, though, is a story that sums this up perfectly, that I always share with the teams I work with. The seed of a bamboo tree is so hard that when it is planted, it will do nothing for almost 5 years. Nothing happens in the first year, the second, the third, or the fourth. You have to water and care for that seed all of those years, seeing no results from your labour. That is until the 5th year. That's when the seed breaks through the soil and begins to grow into a tree, and grow it does almost 90 feet in about a month. Now, during that 5-year period, if the person who had planted that seed had stopped watering it or taking care of the ground area, the seed would have died. If they'd gotten tired of waiting and dug up the seed to see what was taking so long, or walked away from it, the seed would have died and the magnificent tree would not be standing in front of them. This is the magic of character and this approach. We can't immediately measure it. Sometimes our influence is not seen until many years later. As professionals in schools, we must embrace this approach. The last 20 years I've been in education, we have learned and evolved so much in our practice. One of the areas we are working on as a trust is to evolve our early career teachers. As part of our programme, we're trying to embed this philosophy and practice that I've just outlined into the learning and development, so that it becomes second nature to them in their everyday interactions. This isn't a new idea. I know that Professor Arthur and Julie, as you've already heard, are both advocates of this within initial teacher training. As a professional, I'd love us to see this approach become a key component of initial teacher training, ensuring that new teachers coming into education are truly prepared for the challenge and the privilege of shaping the character of future generations. This is what's going to make our profession transformational. So if you've not done so already, order your copy of the book, soak up the wisdom provided, and for those in education, please go out and apply your learning in your school context. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. That was really fantastic, and I love that. I'm trying not to kind of be too much of a plagiarist, but the stories were wonderful, and I was jotting them down as I go, and no doubt they will probably come out of my mouth on stage at some point, and I will try to make sure I credit them to you, because you really brought some kind of really illustrative pictures to you know, why it is so important that we take character so seriously within schools. So thank you very much. It seems you'll see on the question and answer that the framework that Nat was talking about has been extremely popular. He has actually answered that question in the Q&A, so please go to the answered questions bit in the Q&A and you'll be able to find you know, Nat's answer to how you can get hold of that framework. But before we hear from our last speaker, just one last chance to say, please do send in any other questions you want me to put to the panelists, because we will definitely have time to do that after we've heard from our last speaker, of which I'm going to, without further ado, introduce right now. So Tina Lovey is our last speaker for today. She is the CEO of the Rivermead Inclusive Trust, and Tina's had many previous roles in education, including lead for personal social health education and deputy of the social sciences department and enrichment before she became a head teacher, but she didn't want to stop there, and she went on to build on the success of that head teachership to take over the leadership of the Rivermead Community School. So that was where she was head teacher, to actually set up a multi-academy trust on the back of that, where she's, as I say, implements and takes a kind of a very explicit approach to character and character education in the work. So I'm delighted to ask and invite Tina to give some comments on that now. Thank you, Tina.
Hiya, Tom. Hi, everybody. Thanks for that wonderful introduction. Adrian, how am I going to follow you? You were very poetic in your approach, so I've got my work cut out. And Nat, it's good to see you, fellow South East London girl here from Plumstead, so our roots are intertwined there. I was the first in my family to go to university. In fact, I remember my parents saying, don't do it, it's going to cost you a lot of money. I was a bit older in life when I first went to university, and it was a struggle. And I used my Plumstead grit to work my way through that. But I'm very proud of my background, and I think that's why character education really resonates with me. My previous roles, apart from being in education, was around business and finance, so it set me up nicely really to set up a multi-academy trust. I've read the book. Thank you so much. Paul, Andrew and Michael is absolutely fantastic. I mean, my background in education, I had started with Andrew, funny enough, as my course director of the citizenship course at the Canterbury of Christ Church University. And I really embedded what citizenship was all around, about and around. So when I went into my first teaching position, I really wanted to, you know, raise the profile of citizenship and PSHE, where I become the department head. And the core values really resonated with me. And I think once you've got them at your core, you push through. And that is what underpins character education. I do want to highlight a couple of things from the book, because it is wonderful and it is a must read, because it absolutely underpins everything that I set out back in 2016 for the vision and ethos of the Rivermead Inclusive Trust. So at our trust, my purpose is to ensure that no one ever falls through the net. That's quite a hard task when you are working with highly vulnerable learners. You want them to have aspirations and the public to have aspirations around what they can achieve in their career setting. So within our trust, we've not just got, we've got a secondary special school, we've got 2 mainstream primary schools. We've got shoot-offs from our Rivermead Secondary School in our trauma-informed approach, it was absolutely essential that we embedded character education across the whole breadth of our trust. On page 12, the book talks about social and emotional learning. And I remember back in the day when I was a teacher looking at the social emotional learning aspects of learning. And that really resonates with me because, you know, we needed something that would totally underpin what we wanted to put into our character education back in the day. I emphasised at the beginning of our journey that we would need to make sure that we had inclusive language also. I mean, after all, we call ourselves the Rivermead Inclusive Trust, and we have to stand by what our core beliefs are. Moving on, page 16 very much talks around the language of character. And for me, a quote from that was using an explicit language of character in virtues in schools. And that's essential to ensure that everyone follows the same values and vision that the trust want to portray. Now, for me, that is absolutely essential, because when we talk about recruitment and retention, we want to ensure that our recruitment process follows what we have embedded as our core values to ensure that we get our right people. So page 42 also talks about teachers' character virtues. We want to ensure all our school personnel show the character virtues, which includes your confidence, your humility, teamwork, kindness, empathy, and of course, humour. you've kind of got to be laughing a little bit to be working in the world of education. Good communication is obviously key. When that falls down, we've got a bit of an issue, and it's fundamental to live and breathe that in everything that we do. This is the language that I will use when I'm working with our staff community and our student community. Those virtues at recruitment level are essential to ensure that we get the very best staff for our school communities. Where it doesn't work, because let's face it, sometimes it doesn't, staff come into our trust to work, and where they're not aligned with our core ethos and values and our character education, they kind of stick out like a sore thumb. And I think it was Nat that actually said that you have to then really question as to whether you're working in the right environment, because our virtues and what is underpinning our character education are non-negotiables. You know, the people that work with our children have really got to embed this character education that we portray across the whole of our trust. On page 115, it talks very much about social action, and this is a real passion of mine. So this book really goes a long way to really picking out the core values that underpin what we do. We were the first trust nationally to be the sole SEN provider for the National Citizen Service, and many of our staff were employed to work during the holiday time to actually ensure that there was social action that they could portray. So reading that chapter very much resonates with me. And it also gave us a focus and emphasis on character education as promoting mentally healthy individuals. And I stress that because, again, we've got a trauma-informed accredited provision here within our trust, RRR, that very much uses character education to help those young people that have been sectioned within their vulnerable life. And character education is what will ensure that they go on to have many successes and many more life choices and life chances. Finally, the vision of our trust is to talk about the complete person. We promote ourselves very much around the holistic provider. So a therapeutic intervention is essential across all of our communities and our schools. And we celebrate a lot. And that is because we don't just do that with our learners, we do that with staff as well. And that is to really enable all of our staff and our students to feel a boost and to promote their confidence across the board. That's me done. I think I've not overrun 7 minutes. Everyone will be really proud of me that knows that, because I can waffle on for quite a long time. Thank you for listening to me.
Excellent. Thank you so much indeed, Tina, for that fantastic insights. And I think what you touched on there also was showing us that character education isn't just what happens in the classroom, and isn't just what happens between teachers, but it's all that other stuff that happens around, including working with the community and those sorts of areas as well. So thank you for enlightening us on that, and that wider kind of sense of kind of where character education happens, but also how schools sense so centrally to all of that. I'm going to turn to questions and answers, some nice challenging questions and answers coming in for all of our panelists, and I'll be directing those in a minute. Just as a reminder, now you've had the kind of sales pitch, I suppose, to some extent, and the compliments made for this book, and it truly is, as I said at the start, a really good kind of way to get into thinking about character education in the classroom. There is actually available, I've been told it's available in all good bookshops, but there is also a 20% discount if you use the Open Up 20 as a code in the Open University Press, and I'm sure someone will put that into the chat so that you can actually see how you can get your 20% discount if you would like to buy the book. So I'm now going to turn over to questions. Thank you very much to everyone who has been putting the questions in the Q&A, and we will get to as many many as we can. But I'm going to start with the first question to you, Nat, if that's okay. And there's been a question about how you, clearly you spoke very firmly about how leaders are really important in this, but someone's raised the question about students as leaders and how you can actually include students as, you know, kind of as part of kind of the character education approach and give them some responsibility for it. So Nat, have you got any thoughts about how you might include students?
Yeah, I mean, there's the obvious ways as a student council. I think any leadership opportunity that you can generate, sort of formal and informal, is a great way to bring students out themselves and help them build the characters, but also role model that to the others. We had a litter picking squad at Northampton, and it consisted of all the kind of, what would you call them? Not the sporty types, the lads who go around and they used to follow me around with the litter picking. But that in itself, you know, that you're demonstrating kind of a virtue and a humility there, and grabbing opportunities like that for young people to be part of the decision making at every stage. I honestly think that it boils down to listening well to youngsters as well. If they've got ideas and they want to do things, you might not be able to do exactly what they want, but taking that and running with it and allowing them to own it and growing that within your school, it is the way to do this, and the way to involve students, because they're automatically interested in that. I actually think, I said student councils, they're really important, but they can be a bit stuffy and a bit time delayed. You know, they come up, first of all, they have to find out who their rep is, and then they have to go there, and they have to wait 2 weeks for the next meeting, and then hope it filters back through the head of maths, who's also leading the student council. It's all a bit indirect. So it's staff be encouraging and role modeling staff walking around, talking to young people, listening to their messages. And when they ask for something to happen, don't write it off as a kind of, well, kids always say that. Actually do a version of it and publicize that. And then other young people come through and they will feel empowered to actually have a say-so in their own school and therefore develop their values. The other thing I'd say, and hesitantly, is encourage student involvement. Assemblies are a really powerful tool for promoting values, but there's too many assemblies we've seen where they're really not very good quality. So working with young people to produce really excellent, high quality, values-based assemblies for their peers is another really good channel.
Excellent, thank you, Nat. Next, a question to Julie, but Tina May also might want to come in on this because she mentioned how important it is that you get the right teachers into your classroom, that they kind of, or into your school that fits your ethos and culture. But how do you know they are, you know, inverted commas, the right teachers for the job? So, any thoughts on kind of teacher preparation and indeed recruitment for character education? If we could start with you, Julie, because clearly that's part of your day-to-day business, and then maybe Tina, say from the school end, how you help ensure you're getting the teachers you want for this area.
Yeah, of course. Well, even with ITT, we still make sure that the people we recruit onto the course do have the values that we believe in at Warwick as well, because we want them to embody those values too. So we are quite strict about who we take on the course, even from the interview stage as well. But I think because, certainly for us at Warwick, because our course is so values orientated as well, by the time, and we keep revisiting throughout the course, I think by the time they actually go into a school, they're very aware of the kind of school that they want to work in, and lots of the speakers already have talked about the importance of making sure your values align with the institution you're going to work in. And we reiterate that message to the students. You've got to go and look, you've got to go and feel what that ethos is like and feel it's really for you. So we certainly kind of put forward that message to our students, and for our students, just because they are, values is such a core part of everything they do, they can't get away from it really. So they're very much wanting to kind of continue that journey and keep making sure that they're good role models for the students they teach in the future as well. So I hope that helps.
And Tina.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. It was really good to hear what Julie was saying there, because encouraging potential new teachers coming into our schools, that's nationally, you would hope that they've done a little bit of research on the school, looked at the website, maybe gone for a visit, chatted to some key personnel. just to get a good gauge for these new teachers as to whether it is a best fit for them. I mean, I think one of the questions was very much around, well, how do we gauge that if we're you know, employing these people? And just to give you a few, I mean, I wouldn't expect one person to do all of this, so please don't think I'm one of these hardened interviewers, but just some examples would be obviously presentations. We're looking at confidence there, how people come across. Can they be articulate and passionate in how they're you know, the presentation scenario that they're faced with. Short tasks around scenarios. Do they show compassion? Because we're going to be gauging some of our questions around compassion, and have they got a good understanding in how they would deal with certain scenarios. Sometimes we have looked at a glass bowl, and to my fellow professionals out there, this will be, you know, what you would run within your interview processes anyway. But what we're specifically looking at there are our potential employees. How do they interact with each other? Are they kind? Do they listen to each other? Because if you've got somebody that is in that glass bowl sort of scenario and they're overshouting a colleague, do we really want them as part of our wider team in our school setting? Because if they can't listen, then that's going to be a bit of an issue. And actually, to show compassion to a fellow colleague is absolutely essential to us, because if we're expecting our children and young people to show good character education, we're expecting it from our staff as well. And the last, which is my favourite, when I become a head teacher, they launched a lunge at me. Now that sounds glorious. Who doesn't love a finger sandwich at the end of our recruitment process? But actually what they're doing, the senior people, that they're spying on you. They're wanting to see how you interact with other people. And actually when we're bringing people into our organisation, our teachers and our TAs, we really want them to have lunch with the children, because we want to see how they interact with the children. And then the more senior people, we would put them with fellow staff in that school community, in that school setting. So there's some ideas out there. They're not extensive, but there are a few that I've thrown into a recruitment process, and they've worked very well for us.
Thanks, Tina, that's really nice, and some real good practical examples. And we know many schools also make characters front and centre of their recruitment process, almost assuming, hopefully, that and they can show the lesson that they can teach them maths, English and science or whatever. But, you know, in terms of the presentation to the teachers, in terms of the questioning, in terms of even the application form, personal statement, you know, character is very much the heart of that. And I suppose that teachers got it very clearly in their head that this is a school that takes character very seriously if they want to apply and get a job there. A question, a bit of a thorny question actually to Adrian about behaviour and character, because it was a very well posed question in question and answer about allowing children to make mistakes, because quite often schools are very much and need to be run by kind of policies and rules, you know, around behaviour. But character is actually about getting beyond these or living beyond rules in you know, from when children actually grow up and maybe the rules not actually in place. So how do we allow kind of children to actually kind of experiment and kind of learn through kind of actually real living, and perhaps not always getting things right, and developing character that alongside kind of behaviour policies and rules?
I think it's about being really clear about what your expectations are and what your rules are. So across our trust, we've adapted Paul Dix's behaviour rules, which what his were ready, respectful and safe. We've changed that to ready, responsible and respectful. So we can use that to use the character virtues of choice based on the children's actions or lack of actions. So obviously there's certain behaviours which there is little tolerance for. But what I mean by that is that we have to have the conversations with the young people about where it went wrong. And that's the powerful thing. And the thing that we've invested a lot of time in is using restorative conversations. So around that, it centres around asking 6 questions. And the children soon become quite accustomed to what those questions are, because that's the pattern. All staff ask the same 6 questions. So it's not a trick. We're not trying to catch them out. And there's a level of consistency. So we get that thought process which helps our young people develop that practical wisdom because they go through the journey. What were you thinking at the time? Who's that affected? And so on and so on, because then they get used to working in that way. So then eventually the hope is that they apply that themselves before they perform the action.
Excellent. That's really good. Again, we're getting some fantastic kind of really hard practical advice here, and almost seeing teachers as kind of character coaches as well, and using questions to actually kind of turn the mirror or lens back on students to think about their own actions and reflect on them. I'm just going to briefly go around the whole panel and just ask for kind of a final comment from each of you before we turn to Mike to finish off this session. And maybe if you could just highlight one thing either from the book or from what's been said today that you think perhaps our audience today should particularly pay attention to or kind of think about as they leave today's session. So I'll go around in the order of the presentations. So Nat, could I just start with you for a closing reflection?
Yeah, of course. I mean, coming through from several presenters, some of the questions, lots of this is down to clarity and communication, I think. Being clear as a senior team, as a staffing body, as a community and as students, what is it that makes you tick? What are the expectations, as Adrian says, clear in advance, reasons for why you're making decisions and doing certain things, and then getting this sort of ethos and culture built up and, you know, sort of school way or a trust way of doing things. And students understanding what that is, feeling part of ownership, and therefore kind of dealing with misbehaviour becomes a secondary issue at that point. I think you're more kind of you're dealing with students who are listened to, who are able to push forward in their own kind of personal development and own that themselves, rather than always having things done to them. So that would be my final reflection.
Thanks, Nat. That's great. And Julie?
I'd say probably something that I've been thinking a lot about is time for reflection. I think that's such an important part of character development and building in time. Schools and universities are such busy places, but I think what I've seen and comes across really strongly in the book as well is the value of just having time to stand back, to think, to reflect on yourself as a person, to reflect on allow your students chance for them to reflect on their character as well. And I think that pays real dividends actually if you allow that time just to stand back and think and reflect and keep building the virtues into everything that you do. So mine would be reflection, I think, is my takeaway.
Excellent. Thank you, Julie. And Adrian.
Yeah, building on what Julie said, again, likewise, I would say reflection, but also the book enables you to dip in and dip out at pertinent points for you and whatever it is that you're going through or whatever stage you're at in the development of character in your organisation. So it enables you to say, okay, here's some approaches, here's a framework, go away and research it, look at what your context demands, because that's the most important thing. You can't teleport something from context A into your own context because it just won't work. So you've got to get the nuances that are unique to your establishment within that, and then go away and try again and keep trying. Like everybody said on this panel this evening, it's not a quick fix and nobody has all the answers. So you have to just keep trying.
Excellent. Thank you, Adrian. And finally, Tina.
I think my final thought on would be very much around question the true values and ethos of the community where you work. How do you make sure that they align to your character, and how can they be utilised working further afield? So briefly, I've been involved particularly in the last 2 years around the COVID response, both locally and nationally. So working with all schools across the whole of the Southeast, but particularly working with our local authority here in Medway, sunny Medway, and it's had impact. So my core belief has not only impacted those that we are working with in our trust, it's impacted a whole bigger community. And if I can do that, everybody else can do that as well.
Brilliant. Inspiring words to finish with, Tina. Thank you. And thank you again to Nat, Julie, Adrian and Tina for all of their contributions. We've certainly worked them hard over the last hour, not only in their presentations, but also answering those questions and giving us a really kind of rich insight into what's actually happening in the coalface in schools and universities. But I'm going to hand over now to Michael, one of the authors of the book, Mike Fullard, to say some closing words for today's webinar.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, I'm just going to say a few things on behalf of myself, Paul and Andrew. I think when we were writing this book, which was a great experience, hard at times, but as James highlighted, for me and Paul, it was our first book, so it was definitely an experience. We had the idea of making and writing a book that had theory behind it, but for anyone who read it, had those practical ideas, those practical solutions. It had the key ideas, practices and concepts of how to implement character education in a school. And it really pleases me, and I'm sure Paul and Andrew, to hear the 4 speakers and see other endorsements we've had. It seems that we've managed to balance that theory and practice. So it's made me extremely proud. So I'd like to start off by saying a big thank you to our 4 speakers, Nat, Julie, Adrian and Tina. Your words were very insightful, and I hope they've been inspiring to others and very complimentary about the book. So thank you very much indeed. I'd like to say a huge thank you to my Jubilee Centre colleagues, Tom Harrison, for hosting, done a great job. A big thank you to James Arthur for his introduction and for his continued support and guidance throughout the last few years, especially as he pointed out for me and Paul. We're very grateful for that. We'd like to thank the publishers, Open University Press, Eleanor, Zoe, Ali and Beth for their support and patience throughout the process. Thank you very much. And I think for me, and hopefully for Paul and Andrew as well, and a few people picked up on this, for me, one of the strengths of our book actually is the practical elements, but the fact that we have numerous case studies in it. I think we have 25 different case studies, and a lot of those people who wrote those case studies are here today. So we'd like to say a big thank you to all of those. For everybody also that endorsed the book, thank you very much. And for all of those people at some point read a proof, read a paragraph, read a chapter and gave us feedback, we are extremely grateful. The book wouldn't have got to where it was without your support. Importantly, we'd like to thank family and friends, colleagues from the Jubilee Centre and further afield for their support, not only in writing the book, but to get into this position where we could actually write a book. And I think what we'd like to say as well is a big thank you to everyone who's attended today. There's been an excellent turnout, which I think shows that there is a huge commitment to character education, not only in the UK, but internationally. So we'd like to say a big thank you to you, all of you, to remind you that the book is available at all good bookstores, and that there is you've seen the discount if you want to order it from Open University Press. And also, if you are interested and this has inspired you, please look at the Jubilee Centre for further resources, where we have numerous teaching resources. Nat mentioned about evaluating. We have a great evaluation handbook. And for all those teachers, we have a award-winning CPD available online. So please do look at the Jubilee Centre website for further information, as well as all our great research reports. And just on a personal note, me and Paul would like to say a big thank you to Andrew. James did say that this was our first book, and I don't know, Paul might have a different view, but I don't think without the support and the guidance of Andrew, it may not have ended up as thorough and as good as it has done. So we would like to say a huge thank you to Andrew. I think we owe you a beer or potentially 2 beers now next time we're out. So thank you to everyone in attendance, and I wish you all the best. And if you do read the book, please feel free to share any feedback you've got with us. And we look forward to hearing from you all in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. And that concludes today's webinar. I think Michael, in his Oscar speech there, has done all the thank yous that I need to do, and in a much more kind of rigorous way than I would have done. So it leaves us to just repeat what Michael said about, please do look up the Jubilee Centre and all the different resources we have on our website, join the newsletter and join our everything that we're doing in all the different areas. Have a fantastic evening, and wherever you are, because we've had, you can see we've had so many guests from around the world joining us today. But hope you have a great evening, and we look forward to hearing from you at a future event. Thank you.